Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive.
Yeah.
This time, we're going back in time to 1969,
Oh, wow.
the year, well, man walked on the moon,
Huge year.
but also the year that Joseph Wolpe published a book called The Practice of Behavior Therapy.
Okay, so that's what we're diving into.
We are, and you might be thinking 1969, that's ancient history.
Yeah. Is that stuff even relevant today?
Right. But here's the thing, Wolpe, even back then, he was comparing behavior therapy to like the latest technologies and medical advancements.
Oh, interesting.
He saw it as this like applied science, a way to use what we know about how people learn
Uh-huh.
to actually help them change.
Okay.
So we're going to be unpacking some of his ideas
Yeah.
today.
I'm excited.
And I think you'll be surprised how relevant a lot of this stuff still is.
Yeah, what I think is fascinating is that Wolpe, he wasn't just trying to tweak existing types of therapy. He really wanted to revolutionize the whole thing.
Oh, wow.
He looked at the psychology of his day and saw kind of this hodgepodge of speculation and intuition.
Oh,
And he was like, no, we need to bring in the rigor of science, of real methodology.
gives like enough with the abstract theories.
Exactly.
Let's focus on what we can actually see, what we can measure.
Exactly.
I love that.
Yeah.
So how did he actually, how did he go about doing that? What was his approach?
Well, he started by defining behavior therapy as the use of learning principles
Okay.
to change what he called unadaptive behaviors.
Unadaptive behaviors. Okay.
So think of it this way. We all know how habits form, right?
Yeah.
And we know that habits can be changed.
Right.
Well, Wolpe believed that you could take those same principles, the principles of learning, and apply them to help people overcome things like anxiety, phobias,
Yeah.
even things like sexual dysfunctions.
So instead of trying to dig into childhood memories or subconscious desires,
Right.
you're really looking at okay, these behaviors, how are they learned?
Yes.
And then how can we unlearn them or relearn new, more adaptive behaviors?
You got it. It's a completely different way of approaching these problems.
That's so cool.
And the model he really focused on was the stimulus response model.
Okay, the stimulus response model.
Now, before you think that this is too simple, Wolpe himself acknowledges that it's not simple.
Yeah.
He's not saying that humans are just simple creatures responding to, buttons being pushed.
Right, right.
But he believed that by understanding how stimuli and responses are linked through learning, we can start to untangle those complexities and find really targeted ways to help people.
He wasn't trying to reduce humans to robots,
No, not at all.
but he was saying, okay, there's this framework we can use.
Yeah, that's a starting point.
The stimulus response model. But within that, we have to acknowledge that every individual is unique and complex.
Exactly. And a single stimulus could lead to, a whole bunch of different responses depending on your personal learning history and all sorts of other factors.
That makes sense.
It's like, okay, think about touching a hot stove.
Yeah.
You're going to pull your hand away, right?
Yeah, of course.
That's your basic stimulus response.
Right.
But how you react to that pain, whether you cry or curse or laugh it off,
Uh-huh.
that's all shaped by your individual experiences.
Yeah, that's a great example.
Yeah.
So he was using the stimulus response model, but always remembering that complexity of the individual person within that framework.
Absolutely.
I like that.
And this is where his emphasis on empirically proven methods comes in.
Okay, empirically proven methods.
He believed that we should use methods that we know work, that have been shown to work.
Like scientifically proven.
Yeah, even if we don't completely understand all the little details of how they work.
So it's like, if it helps people, let's use it while we're still researching and trying to understand better how it works.
Exactly. He uses this analogy of colchicum?
Colchicum.
Yeah, it was used to treat gout for centuries
Okay.
before anyone knew how it worked at a physiological level.
Interesting. So it's like saying, we know this medicine helps, let's use it, but we'll keep working on figuring out exactly why.
Right, exactly.
That's a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
I bet, though, that some people back then,
Oh, yeah.
maybe even some people today, would find that approach a little bit unsettling
I can see that.
because it's very focused on behaviors,
Yeah.
the things we can observe.
Right.
It might feel a bit mechanical,
Yeah.
like you're treating people like machines instead of like these complex beings with emotions and inner lives.
That was definitely a criticism
Yeah.
that was leveled at behavior therapy.
It makes sense why people would feel that way.
Totally.
So how did Wolpe respond to that?
Well, he addressed it head on. He said that using knowledge, using like an understanding of mechanisms,
Okay.
doesn't make therapy any less compassionate.
Uh-huh.
Think about it like a surgeon
Okay.
who uses the latest, robotic surgery technology.
Right.
Is that surgeon any less caring than one who uses traditional methods?
That's a good point.
In fact, they might be able to help the patient even more effectively because of that technology.
Yeah, it's not about being cold or detached. It's about using the best tools you have to help.
Exactly.
I like that. But let's get specific.
Okay.
How did he actually, put these ideas into practice?
Yeah, so what did those empirically proven methods actually look like?
Right.
Well, one of the techniques he's most known for is called systematic desensitization.
Okay.
And it's still used widely today to treat things like phobias and anxiety disorders.
Oh, wow.
So imagine you have a fear of spiders,
Okay, I do. So this is good.
a real phobia.
Yeah.
It impacts your life.
Uh-huh.
Wolpe's approach wasn't to just throw you in a room full of spiders and say
To go with it.
get over it.
Wow.
He knew that that's not helpful.
Right. That sounds terrifying.
Yeah, not exactly therapeutic.
Yeah.
Instead, you need to create a safe and controlled environment where you can gradually confront your fear.
Okay.
So the first step would be to work with a therapist and create kind of like a hierarchy of your fears.
A hierarchy. Oh,
So maybe looking at a picture of a spider is like a 2 out of 10 on your fear scale,
okay.
but actually touching one is like a 10 out of 10.
Right. Ranking the scary stuff.
All right, from least to most terrifying.
Got it.
And then how do you get over the fear?
Yeah. That's the question.
That's where the desensitization part comes in.
Okay.
So you would learn relaxation techniques like deep breathing,
Okay.
muscle relaxation.
Yeah, things to counteract that anxiety.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
And then you would start with that least scary thing on your list.
The 2 out of 10,
Yeah.
the picture.
Okay. And you gradually expose yourself to it while using those relaxation techniques.
Okay.
So the goal is to stay relaxed while facing your fear.
Oh, interesting.
And you're slowly rewiring your brain's response.
Okay.
So you might start by looking at a cartoon spider,
Right.
then a photo,
Okay.
maybe a video,
Mm-hmm.
and then eventually, work your way up to being in the same room as a real spider.
Like slowly dipping your toe in cold water instead of just jumping right in.
Exactly. You get used to it little by little.
So your body's not going into complete shock.
Right.
Okay.
And this is all based on this principle of counter-conditioning.
Counter-conditioning.
So you're pairing the thing that you fear, the spider,
Mm-hmm.
with a feeling that's incompatible with fear, like relaxation.
Okay, so you're kind of replacing the fear with a different feeling.
Right. And over time, that new association, the relaxation gets
Right.
stronger and the fear response weakens.
That makes sense.
It's amazing how powerful this technique can be.
Yeah, it sounds a lot more humane than
Oh, yeah,
some of the stuff that was around back then.
for sure.
But Wolpe didn't just stop with phobias, right? He used this approach for other stuff too.
Absolutely. He was a real pioneer in applying these learning principles to all sorts of challenges.
I like it.
Another area where he had a big impact was in the treatment of sexual dysfunctions.
Oh, wow.
Things like impotence and frigidity.
Now, this is the 60s, right?
Yeah, this is the 60s.
When, talking about sex was still a little taboo.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And a lot of these issues were seen through a Freudian lens.
Right.
Deep-seated psychological conflicts.
So instead of, addressing the actual, physical or emotional aspects of these issues,
Right.
you're saying they were attributing it to, childhood trauma and these, hidden desires.
Exactly, which often meant really lengthy therapies that
Yes.
weren't always effective.
Right.
Wolpe, on the other hand, he believed that these issues often came from learning anxieties and inhibitions.
Okay.
And he argued that you could address them directly with behavioral techniques.
So instead of digging into the past,
Right.
you're really focusing on the present and, how can we relearn, unlearn, whatever it is
Exactly.
to have a healthier relationship with these things.
It's about focusing on the behaviors and how they can be changed.
Okay, that's interesting.
So how did he apply these techniques to something as, personal and sensitive as sexual dysfunction?
Yeah, that's a great question because it seems like a whole different beast than being afraid of spiders.
It was revolutionary for its time,
Okay.
but the principles are actually very similar.
Oh.
He developed this technique called therapeutic sexual arousal.
Okay.
Now, it might sound a little clinical,
A little bit, yeah.
but it was really about creating this safe and gradual process for couples to rediscover intimacy and pleasure without that pressure or anxiety.
So instead of digging into their past, he was helping them focus on the present
Right.
and, relearning how to connect physically and emotionally.
Exactly. It was about breaking down those anxiety-provoking aspects of sex
Okay.
and then rebuilding a sense of pleasure and connection.
I like that.
So imagine a couple that's struggling with intimacy issues.
Okay.
Instead of jumping straight into intercourse,
Yeah.
Wolpe would suggest that they start with things like sensual massage, focusing on touch and relaxation,
Okay.
and then maybe they progress to other forms of non-genital contact,
Mm-hmm.
slowly building up their comfort and trust.
It's like taking it step by step,
Yeah, it's that systematic approach.
like we talked about with the fear hierarchy. You're
Exactly.
desensitizing yourself to the anxiety and rediscovering intimacy at your own pace.
That's a great way to put it, and it was groundbreaking.
I can imagine.
He was really challenging those societal taboos around sex
Yeah.
and giving couples practical tools to overcome anxieties and build healthy, intimate lives.
This is cool.
It really is.
It's like he's taking these seemingly simple learning principles
Right.
and applying them to this whole range of human experiences.
Exactly.
And he didn't stop there, right?
No, he didn't.
From what I understand, he also developed techniques to help people who struggled with being assertive.
Yes, he recognized that a lot of psychological distress comes from not being able to express your needs and feelings
Right.
effectively.
Yeah.
And he developed this technique called assertive training
Assertive training.
that
Okay.
helped people find that sweet spot between being passive and aggressive.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Right. It's about learning to stand up for yourself,
Right.
setting healthy boundaries,
Yeah.
communicating effectively, but without becoming a doormat
Right.
or resorting to anger.
So you're not being walked all over,
Right.
but you're also not like a jerk about it.
Exactly.
They're finding that balance.
They're finding that balance.
Okay.
Yeah.
I could see how that would be so helpful for people who are shy or, people pleasers, easily intimidated.
Oh, absolutely.
But how do you actually teach someone to be more assertive?
Right.
Because it seems like such a personality trait,
It does, but that's where Wolpe's genius for breaking things down into learnable steps comes in.
I love that about him.
Me too.
So assertive training, what does that involve?
So it involves identifying what are your own needs and limits,
Okay.
learning specific communication techniques.
Right. So how do you actually say things?
Yeah, exactly. And then practicing those techniques in a safe environment
Well, that's smart.
before you apply them in real life.
So it's like role-playing different situations.
Exactly.
And you're building up that confidence to then handle it when it comes up in real life.
You got it.
Oh, that's
And again, it's not about becoming a completely different person.
right.
It's about empowering you to communicate better,
Yeah.
to build healthier relationships.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's amazing how ahead of his time he was with all these techniques.
Oh, for sure.
Because this stuff is still used so widely today.
Yeah. And it really speaks to his commitment to focusing on what actually works.
What makes a difference in people's lives?
Yes, he wasn't afraid to challenge what everyone else was doing and push for that more scientific, evidence-based approach.
Okay, I want to touch on something we mentioned earlier,
Okay.
which is his insistence on using those empirically proven methods.
Yeah.
He hammered that point home throughout the whole book.
He did. It was very important to him.
And that was a radical stance to take back then.
Oh,
Because, like we were saying, a lot of the therapeutic practices at the time were based more on tradition.
intuition rather than hard science.
So he was kind of like a rebel in the world of psychology,
Yeah, you could say that.
like shaking things up,
Shaking things up.
demanding proof that these therapies actually worked.
Show me the data.
I love that.
Right. Prove to me that this method actually helps people.
Yeah.
And that commitment to evidence-based practice has shaped the entire field of therapy.
That's so cool to think about how much of an impact his work has had.
It really is.
But the world of psychology hasn't stood still, right?
Not at all.
There have been so many advances since 1969.
Oh, yeah.
New research, new technologies, new understandings of how our brains work.
Tons of new stuff.
And this brings us to a really interesting question for our listener.
Okay, hit me.
How do you think the perception and practice of behavior therapy have evolved in the 21st century? Yeah, it's a big question.
Yeah, have those criticisms, the ones that Wolpe was dealing with?
They just kind of faded away.
Right. Or have new ones popped up?
As we've learned more about the brain,
Yeah.
it makes you think.
Yeah.
Have some of those techniques that we've been talking about
Right.
been tweaked, based on new research?
That's a good point.
Or have totally new therapies emerged that Wolpe couldn't have even dreamed of?
Right, back in '69.
Yeah.
Like, what about all the neuroscience stuff
Oh, yeah.
and brain imaging?
Could you?
How has that impacted our understanding of behavior therapy?
I mean, imagine
Yeah.
being able to see those changes in the brain
Yeah.
as someone goes through systematic desensitization
Oh my God.
or assertive training.
Right.
That's wild.
Yeah, it makes you think. At least, like, what would Wolpe think of all this?
Yeah.
Would he be surprised by how far we've come? Or
Right.
would he be like,
Yeah.
I told you so. This is what I was talking about.
It all comes back to learning.
Right.
That's the core.
Yeah, so I guess, for our listener out there,
This is something to really think about.
for sure,
Like, how has behavior therapy evolved in the 21st century?
go do some digging.
Yeah. Look into it.
See what's out there.
Maybe find some sources that talk about Wolpe specifically
Oh, yeah.
and how his work has influenced modern therapy.
That would be really
What
interesting.
resonates with you?
Right.
What challenges what you thought you knew?
And what makes you want to learn more?
That's what it's all about, right?
That's what we hope for.
Yeah, to spark that curiosity.
Yeah.
Keep learning.
Learning is a journey.
It is.
It never ends.
It's like we always say,
Always more to discover.
keep those minds curious.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for diving in with
I
us.
hope you learned something new.
Maybe you had some aha moments.
Until next time.